take it away.
Yes. Thank you so much, Hillary. And we just want to say thank you from the bottom of our heart to Fabled. If you're sitting here, you probably love this space as much as we do. It's just such a special place in Waco. And so, yeah, thank you, Fabled, for hosting us and for being excited about our exhibit. We're thrilled to be here. And again, thank you to Kimberly, Allison, Hillary, Haley, who helped put this on tonight. So we're thrilled. Thank you also to Ty and V, of course, for being here and letting us pick their brain for the evening. V is based in Austin, and so we're so happy when she comes up, or comes up and lets us speak with her. And then finally, thank y'all here. Those of you that are here, thank you for spending your evening with us. We are inspired by people who want to talk about art and poetry and all of these things. And so thank you for spending this time with us and joining us and kind of being curious about these topics. So what we'll do tonight is I will kind of ask questions of Ty and V. They'll share their thoughts. We're going to do a little bit of poetry reading as well of some of their favorite poets, and also they're going to share some of their poetry. And then we'll save some time at the end for audience Q&A. So if the wheels are turning and you're wondering things about their work or their writing, save that question for the end because they will be very excited to ask it. So I want to take a couple minutes to share their bios with you. You've seen their pictures all over social media. If you went to the opening, you heard them a little bit, but we have two truly impressive people who are exhibiting in Waco right now, and I just want to sorry to embarrass you, but I just want to spend a couple minutes sharing some of the amazing things that these two have done and continue to do. So let me start with Dr. Ngo. Austin-based visual artist. She draws influence from her life as a Vietnamese American, a physician, a mother, an activist. Born to refugee parents in rural Pennsylvania, V's passion for the arts was initially overshadowed by cultural expectations and interest in the sciences and a desire to serve others. But after establishing a successful career in medicine, V finally came back to her creative core and began painting in 2015. Her prolific and dedicated studio practice has expanded from painting to 3D sculptural painting to site-specific installations. And Art Center is very lucky to actually have one of your site-specific installations, one of Ty's site-specific installations in our galleries. That's such a cool thing. V's had several solo exhibitions and group shows in public art spaces across Texas and across the country. Her work's been acquired by private and public permanent collections, including Austin City Hall and Texas A&M Multicultural Center. She's drawn attention from various publications and media outlets such as Austin Women, PBS Arts in Context. She and Ty both have this in common. She was listed as one of the top 10 contemporary artists in Austin to know by Culture Trip. So whether it's representational work or abstract paintings or large-scale installations, V creates work in spaces for the purpose of dialogue and introspection around topics like identity, culture, political issues, memory, and the human experience. So just a lot going on there and such beautiful work. So let's give a round of applause for Dr. V. Ngo, an incredible woman in our presence. Yeah. Okay, Ty Nathan Clark, our Waco guy. Many of you have probably met him before. So Ty's been creating in multiple mediums since he was 4 years old. So a long time. His uncle, that wasn't a dig. But since 4 years old, that's a while, yeah. His uncle Conway Jiggs Pearson, a world-renowned sculptor and raku artist, impacted his passion for the art at an early age. Kind of fast forwarding a little bit, in 2021, he founded the Ty Nathan Clark Artist Mentorship Program, which is a program for established and emerging artists. And he currently has 44 alumni from 15 different countries around the world. So this is happening right in Waco. Ty is running an international artist mentorship program from our town. That's really, really amazing. Ty's traveled to 5 continents while living, creating, and learning in over 20 countries. Again, like the Culture Trip named Ty one of 10 contemporary artists in Austin to watch in both 2017 and 2019. In 2019, his award-winning film Jump Shot was an official selection for the South by Southwest Film Festival. Ty's currently working on an episodic documentary series, and he completed his first novel in 2020. He's shown work across the country, all the way from the Goss Michael Gallery to the Delaware Contemporary Museum of Art. So besides the influence of Uncle Jigs, Ty studied under American sculptor William Catling and renowned Japanese-American abstract painter Mako Fujimura, who many of you might be familiar with if you've read his work. Ty spearheaded collaborations with other artists, organizations, and communities around the world for the last 2 decades, advancing topics of support and dialogue around things like, again, the arts, culture, community building, and culture care. He lives and creates in his studio here in Waco, Texas with his wife, Mandy, who's here with us tonight. And he's currently represented by galleries in Los Angeles, San Francisco, Houston, Austin, Las Vegas, and New York. So let's give a round of applause for Ty Nathan Clark. Yes. So thank you for indulging me and letting me talk about how impressive you both are, because I don't think we get to talk about it quite enough. So this event tonight is being held or hosted in conjunction with your 2-person exhibition called Of Warm Impermanence at Art Center Waco. This show's on view through July 22nd. So before we get too into the friendship and literary topics, let's just spend a couple minutes talking about that exhibit. So what is sort of the heartbeat of that body of work, and how should viewers interpret both the title and also sort of the major themes of the exhibit?
Well, I mean, both Ty and I are abstract artists, right? But if you get to see the exhibit, which I highly encourage everyone to go see, there will be videos there of our process. And you'll see like how different our process is, but actually how complementary they are as well. And when we started talking about the exhibition, a lot of things that we have in common in our process is also the influence of music, as well as literature and poetry. And so we thought the idea of putting a playlist together of our favorite songs that speak to the themes of the show. We started compiling. There was like, 125 songs? I mean, it was really long. But what's so great about Spotify is that you can actually see the lyrics to each of the songs. And so we wanted to like capture the essence of our musical influence as well as the exhibition and the themes in it through a lyric or a song title. And one of our favorite artists is David Bowie, and his song is Changes. He's wearing a shirt. Representing. And in that song is the words of Warm Impermanence. And it's a great place to start of thinking of what does that mean, you know, as you walk through the exhibition. And it's that idea that every moment is temporary. Whether you're feeling pain, whether you're feeling joy, whatever it is, it's only for that moment. So it's about being in that space of taking in the work and just allowing yourself to be present with it, but also know that it represents life, you know, and by knowing that things are impermanent, there's some comfort in that. That's the warmth part, right? Yeah. So it was fun doing the show together because we have such complementary but diverse process, as well as our work is very different, but yet it speaks to the same things, right? Yeah. I'm gonna let you elaborate more on the themes of the show.
Yeah. And you know, like we said, you know, there's a long list of themes that are represented in the show, and we both work. The majority of our stories within our work as abstract artists, we're telling stories with paintings, right? Because it's not real, right? It's not realist. It's not a tree. It's not a human being. It's something that is an abstraction, but as expressionists, it's coming from emotion. So we both use memory as one of the major themes of all of our work. So, and we all know that throughout an entire lifetime of memory, they're not all happy, they're not all sad, they're not all angry, they're not all frustrating, they're beautiful. There's a wide array of emotions and memory and feelings. And so when you walk through the show and you look at our work, our titles are always a good place to sometimes start. I don't always encourage you to look at the title first. I'd rather you look at the work first and then look at the title. But think through those things, right? When you do read a title, when you look at abstract expressionist work, we use color and form and texture and all these things the way a poet would write words, would create emotion and create a feeling through words on a pen to paper. That's what we do with color and texture and movement. And so if you go see the show and you look around at these pieces, those are the things you're looking through. And then you might there might be some context in the title that provides you with what the piece is. And not all titles are literal either. right? They could be grander feelings, grander emotions that may be either really short or, like me, really long. I'm a curator's nightmare because I write paragraphs sometimes for my titles. And so I do encourage you to go. I go look at work that I love, but I also love to go look at work that I dislike because it teaches me so much about myself. Why do I like things? Why do I dislike it? There are plenty of artists in the world who I did not like, and then I went to see their work on purpose, and then I bought their books and read about them, and I now love and adore them. So I do encourage you, even if you go in and you're like, I don't know what this is for me, spend some time. Ask why it's not for you. Look at things, try and draw some emotion from what you may be seeing. But
so the show's been on view for about 3 weeks now, and we've got about 5 to 6 weeks left. So as you think about the feeling of having a show on view in a town for that long of a time, what are some of your hopes and dreams for this integrative body of work living and breathing in Waco for the next 5 weeks?
I mean, I think our biggest thing is just to have it be seen and felt. You know, like to feel artwork is like, you know, when you listen to a song, when you read something, you know, it touches you in a place that then kind of gets imprinted, right? Everything that we allow ourselves to be in view of in consumption, it becomes a part of us. It becomes a fabric of who we are. And so like, I think the biggest hope for artists is to have an impactful show that imprints something that people can walk away with. You know, a feeling of connection to themselves, a feeling of connection to a memory that they've elicited, and let that be an experience, you know. I think that's the biggest thing for artists to feel that that's the mission point, you know. For once we release that work out into the world, it's no longer ours. It's yours, it's Waco's. Waco gets to take it in and then decide what it means to them, and then how does that shift and change the landscape of the culture of Waco. I think that's the significance of it.
Yeah, that's pretty profound. I think that's a great way to really say that. And I'm an artist, but I'm also an art nerd. And so I also know that feeling of what you hope work will do. So I go look at shows all over the country. I go to art museums, I go to galleries, and I always do my best to connect with artists after I see a show. And I've had some massive artists respond to me because I put up a video or I've shared their painting on Instagram and I've said how much I love it and what it means to me. And I've had some of my heroes from the Nick Cages of the art world to the John Michael Adams to the Glenn Lejans, like just really powerful artists, the Marilyn Minters, who have responded back to me and said, thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for what you got. So also, when you look at art, share it. Bring people to see it. Like, don't just go by yourself. If it really touched your soul, grab a few friends and bring them back. Build a conversation around it. Find ways to just take it a little bit further outside of yourself as well.
Yeah. Well, the majority of the work in the show was actually created for the show. So I think it's powerful that you two have given a gift to Waco. No matter where the work goes after this, the majority of it was created for the show. And I think that as Wacoans, as people living in Waco, that is a gift that we kind of need to feel the magnitude of, and I definitely do. So thank you for doing that. Okay, let's transition or pivot a little bit to this idea of friendship in the arts and what that has looked like for the two of you. Friendship has been such a central theme of this exhibit, even from its inception, when we were first thinking about what would it look like to do a two-person exhibition, which, you know, duo exhibitions, they are not that common, and we're even seeing sort of a rise in them, but it's amazing to see what does it look like when you put two artists' work in conversation in the same space, and what does that look and feel like when those two people are artistic counterparts. So let's kind of start big picture, then zoom in, and then we'll zoom out a little bit. So as artists, thinking about friendships you've had with other artists, what role has friendship or connections with other artists played in your life, in your evolution and growth as artists, or even in your studio practices?
Well, first I want to say, I want to recognize Jane, because she curated the show. It was her baby. And when you started having the discussion with Ty, I think it came up like, well, who would you want to do the show with? And you knew my work through Ty as well,
Yes.
and you knew about our friendship.
Yes.
So, it was really incepted out of the concept and idea of two art friends. And so I think that's like an important theme to our show as well, as like as human beings experiencing things that are very common but very different backgrounds. And showing that human experience and that commonality in that space is real and tangible. As artists, we create in isolation. You're in your studio for hours at a time by yourself. You're in your head with your ideas and your thoughts and your feelings. It's a very personal space, and one that needs to be nourished by community. Because if you create in isolation all the time and you don't seek out support, it can be very daunting and hard to overcome a lot of the trials and tribulations and the journeys of an artist. Because it's not always, points of great inspiration and magic happens. There's lots of tears and there's lots of struggles and lots of frustration. And so, it's really important. Community is important in every aspect, and even more so in the arts. So, Ty and Andy were living in Austin, and I was following his work on Instagram. Love social media for this place of connection. And I reached out to him, and we met up one day over coffee. And it was from that moment on that when we started having conversations, we realized how much we had in common, but how much we just really enjoyed each other's company, and also finding someone that understands the journey and the struggle, is real. And so we just became friends from the get-go, and it became a really great place of support. We had our first show together. There was a house that was on the market that was empty. We turned it into a gallery, and that was our first show together in Austin. That was fun. And it's kind of crazy thinking that here we are, was that 6 years later?
Yeah.
7 years later? 7 years later. In this beautiful space that Waco has provided for us. I mean, it's absolutely such an honor. And then to be able to bring that conversation full circle here in Waco together for that show, but also now in Fabled, because I think when I came up to visit, we came here. I came to visit the space, and we came here to discuss the exhibition. So yeah, it's pretty crazy, but I love it.
Well, let me differentiate real quick. There's two different types of artist friends, right? There's friends you have that are artists, and then you have artist friends, right? The difference is the friends you have as artists you kind of see and you say hi to every now and then. But the deep friends you have that are an artist friend build into you in a way that every artist must have. Like, the art world does not move without artist friendships, period. 99% of artists get into a gallery because of other artists in the gallery. Curators find artists through the artists they're curating. It's not just a wide search. They're asking before they look. Who do you know? Who's a good artist that would fit? Who would? So that importance of having artist friends for your career is massive, but you have to have somebody that's willing to be completely transparent and vulnerable with you, with their work, what they're trying to do, how they're trying to do it, but can also tell you something's wrong. Your work just doesn't look strong right now. What's going on? Like, being able to have accountability from other artists is just massive. And any artist that has that will tell you that's the most important thing in my life. The artists that don't have it go, how do I find it?
Yeah.
Where can I find that? And so you look through the history of artists, you will not see the world's most famous museum artists that aren't talking about their friends that are artists. In every book you read, every art history book, doesn't matter, they're talking about somebody that was part of their inspiration and they wouldn't have gotten to the places they got without them.
Well, I mean, you think about like in France and like the Impressionists, there was a community there. There was and there's the salons, right? That like a community of artists that support each other. It's like the same thing in New York, like the New York Academy of Arts. Like, they're all there. Like you talked about our favorite mentors in art, it's the abstract expressionists, and they have their community, right? And so like it's part of our survival for our practice, but also for a support system in a way that launches lots of careers. Like a lot of artists move up together, and there's a reason for that. And it is just as important as a partnership relationship, by the way, of like your lifetime partner. It's like that. It really is, because it's a place of being vulnerable with your thing that's most precious to you. And that's a sacred relationship.
Yeah.
You know, like I know I can call Ty anytime and discuss the things that are frustrating me, and I know I'll get an honest answer back, and it'll be, and I can take the brutal honesty because we're friends, and I trust that everything that you say to me comes from a place of love, right? That's with every relationship, really.
So to probe into that a little further, what nuances or characteristics of this friendship do you think have been most impactful, and how did you build that? How did you build a friendship that was equally supportive and championing of each other and honest and being able to say difficult things when you need to?
I mean, I think number one was just kindred spirits. Like, I think there was just a likeness of like a person that's almost feels like you're kind of looking at a reflection of yourself in a way. Obviously, we're from two very different backgrounds. Not only being male and female, but also just our backgrounds of our family, totally different, right? But yet we clicked on certain things like music and literature and poetry, and we were both artists, you know? And I mean, I've always been somebody that has always kind of been looking for other artists, right? I'm always on that look, right, for artists to network with, and who can we? And then I think there was just some mutual things in that search as well in Austin, because you may think Austin's a great art town. It's not. There are some pockets of really cool and great things happening, but it's not a high contemporary art town, right? It's not like Houston. It's not like Dallas-Fort Worth. There are pockets, but it's not this overarching thing. And so artists are always looking in Austin for other contemporary artists to connect with too. And I think once we connected, it just clicked. And there wasn't really much else needed at that point. But I will say, she pushes me whether she knows it or not, because in the moments where I'm frustrated with making work, I can sit back and go, hold on, time out. V's a doctor, and she's a mother, right? And she's trying to paint and travel and speak. All I do is paint and teach artists. I can find the time to paint more. Yeah. So like, even though she doesn't know, that encouragement for me, if she's really, really working hard in a lot of things, you know what I mean? That it encourages me to go, well, I can do more than I'm doing today for sure.
Yeah. Don't make me cry. Cry, we love it.
It's too early, I haven't even read my poetry yet.
Now you definitely can't see it.
Oh my God. Yeah, I mean, I also think though, like, the themes of the show is, you know, I think both Ty and I have been through things. You know, we've gone through a process of trauma and healing through memories, and the art is a place for us to work that out, but also like understand grief and understand love and the full spectrum of that life experience has, you know. And I think you can really feel that in our work, as well as the titles that really kind of, you know, hit home. Like Ty is 6'2"? 6'4", I'm off by 2 inches. You're a lot taller, but like from down here, it's hard to calculate. But I'm 5'1". He likes his titles long. I like my titles short. And that's what's so great about our friendship, is like we complement each other in those ways. And so yeah, it's a really special thing. And we're just so grateful to have this experience to be able to share it with y'all.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you did a house show many years ago. This has been a probably longer and more involved process of putting on a 2-person exhibit, filling up a whole gallery. So what has it been like doing that together? What has been illuminating or transformative or maybe even challenging about putting on an exhibition with an artist friend?
I think honestly, being friends made it easier.
Yeah.
Right? Because we know each other's work so well. It's like, you know, it's like the knowing of the person. And because of that, we didn't know what each other were bringing to the show until install day. We're like, okay, we walked through the gallery initially, we're like, okay, how many pieces do we need? How much room do we need to let it breathe? You create installation, you do your sculpture work, and go. It was like, that was complete trust, right? Complete, utter trust. And so we brought the work all together on install day, and it was fun. It was like playing Tetris in a way, but like curation-wise, with Jane's help, of course. But being able to see our work for the first time and get that impression together and then let the work speak to each other was so fun.
Yep.
I don't think there was a lot of challenges. And I think that's because we have such a deep friendship and trust and understanding of each other's work and how we work and our vision. We're both hardworking, that is clear. And we both know ourselves so well, that is clear. And so because of that, we have this just really easy way of working together, and it was, I'm pretty proud of us, bud.
Yeah.
I am.
But yeah, the trust factor was key because, I mean, I've had some crappy installs, right? With either artists who are just pompous or they're just not focused, right? I know we are both very focused when it comes to things, so there are a lot of artists that aren't very focused at things. And so I've been on the ends of both before. This is by far the easiest install and for the biggest show we've done, right?
Yeah.
As far as the breadth of work, the size of space, it's the biggest show we've done, and it was the easiest I've ever done. I mean, it didn't even feel like I did it.
Yeah.
Physically tired, but mentally it breathes.
Yeah, physically tired for sure.
Yeah, it was a great install. Obviously, that body of work is yours. You created it. So you created it in isolation, but also now it lives together. As you look at the show, what is it like to have your work in conversation together? Sort of objectively stepping back and looking at the work and looking at each other's work. What does that feel like to have the work in it's not just you two in conversation, it's your work in conversation now.
It's been pretty incredible, and I will say I've got to experience this, not just from myself, but by walking 30 high schoolers through it, by walking families with young children through it, by, I mean, I've been in it numerous times with family, with other people, on my own, by myself numerous times as well to really experience what being insane. And I think it's really fun to step back and watch somebody from 6 years old to somebody who's 80 years old and see the breadth of people talking about how the work really does speak to each other. Because I can think it on my own, but being able to visualize the audience thinking it and hearing them say it has been pretty supernatural, to say the least, for me.
I didn't have that privilege as much as you. I'm kind of jealous. Like, cause it was such like a whirlwind. Like, we had the 2-night openings, and then I literally had to go straight back home after the opening because I had to work at the hospital the next day. And so it's been nonstop. I haven't really gotten to be in that space to absorb it yet. I gotta be honest, and I'm really kind of sad by that, but I'm excited to come back for our artist talk in July 12th to really do that again and actually be able to sit with it this time, because there is something about seeing art. It's fun to go out to openings and like it's a social thing, but there's something, you don't really get to see the show, and we were just so mentally and physically exhausted at that point. I didn't really get to absorb it and sit with it. And even sometimes as artists, we forget to take stock of where we were and how far we've come. And I think that's with everything in life, right? We have to always take a moment to acknowledge where we were 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 days ago, and how we're always changing and growing. And I think, this show is really for us, the amount of growth that we've seen in each other's work and our careers since that house show that was like a rebel show, is pretty amazing. And like, it's pretty phenomenal to take stock of that. So I hope everyone will take the time to go and be quiet and sit with it, as well as I'm looking forward to doing that myself.
I can take you by actor if you want.
Okay.
Oh, no, I got work tomorrow
I
at the
got
hospital.
Oh, okay. Always going back to the hospital. Okay, last question about friendship before we kind of pivot and think about literary influences. Zooming back out, what would be your advice to other creatives or even just other professionals about cultivating, empowering, sharpening, life-giving friendships?
I think it's important to take the time. Life gets busy and you can make it busy, but it's about taking the time to create those connections and understand the value of those connections, and then honestly honor them. Like water them, let them grow and be vulnerable. Allow yourself to be real. I think that's really important. Also, you know, don't be afraid to step outside yourself. If there's people that you admire, that you think are doing what you'd like to do, reach out to them. Because at some point, they were you. You know, I have to remind myself all the time, it's like, you know, we're always looking forward, like I was just saying, but like sometimes we need to realize, like, I was that emerging artist at one time, reaching out to a fellow artist in Austin, wanting to talk about art. You know what I mean? And like, I didn't know him, but I reached out to him. And it's just, it's amazing when you take risk and you allow yourself to be vulnerable, what kind of doors can open up for you. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, invest time. I mean, I think that's the key. I'm around a lot of people on a regular basis as far as like teaching artists and working with artists and things, but I take time to invest in those friends who are close to me, period. I know Manny can say it all the time. There's friends in my life that every week, I'm still sending a message to or calling to say hi, right? And they may be in Boston, or they may be in LA, or they may be in, you know, I mean, London, wherever they are. There are certain people that they're in your life for a reason, and a lot of them are in paintings now, too, those stories, right? They exist. I feel I'm a memory storer. I'm a history holder, right? And so those people mean so much. Don't ignore the fact that they meant so much. Because next thing you know, you're older, they're older, and 10 years have gone, 20 years have gone, you're like, man, I wish I would have just kept up with so-and-so. And I think we can all say that about somebody in our life. I think we all, no matter what age we are, we can say, yeah, man, I wish I would have. It's like, well, then don't say it, just do it. And I think that's the key, invest. Like,
Yeah. Okay, let's pivot, start to talk about writing and poetry and all the beautiful things. Okay, so we're in this beautiful, beautiful bookshop, Fabled. We love Fabled. Can we just have a round of applause
Yes.
for Fabled? We love it. I really consider this a sacred space in Waco and a very nourishing space in Waco because of the way it feeds curious minds in our town. And we're surrounded by thousands and thousands of books, right? Thousands? Yes. Tens of thousands. Yes. So in addition to being very talented and very prolific artists and very multifaceted people, the two of you are avid readers and longtime writers and poets. So I'd love to kind of dive into that a little bit. Can you sort of briefly share the origin stories of how you came to love reading and then how you came to begin writing or writing poetry?
I'm going to be honest. I did not grow up as an avid reader. I was more of a writer. Being second generation child of refugees and immigrants, my parents were learning English as a second language, right? So and they were working all the time, trying to establish a life in the US. So I didn't have those parents that they pushed me in school, but they didn't push me to read because they weren't avid readers themselves. But for me, I discovered it slowly on my own because being up in rural Pennsylvania, I didn't have a lot of culture around me. It was a very small and rural town, and not many people that looked like me. And so reading when I could, it was always poets. I went to poetry first. For some reason, that was easier for me to consume as well as, you know, later on became more novels and such. But poetry was a language that I understood. And because of that, the way I processed a lot of emotions growing up in a place of isolation was through art, was through either writing a lot of my own thoughts and feelings, but in the form of poetry, or drawing, or dance. Those were the three mediums of creativity that I really connected with in a place of self-expression, and allowed me to process my emotional space. So there's, you know, as painters, I feel like we're creating the imagery of the poem, and there's something that's so sacred about words to create the feeling and experience as well, that, you know, the interchange was very fluid and easy for me. You know, growing up, poets that, you know, I really enjoyed, that I connected with were, you know, Edgar Allan Poe, you know, Stevens. I mean, some of the classics, of course, Alexander Pope, like all of these classics that I grew up around. And there's something about poetry that isn't so literal, right? In a way, it allows the person that's reading it to create and interpret And I think that's why we like Extraction as well. You know, it has that similar vein. So for me growing up, literature and writing and poetry was my escape. It was my way of processing feelings and life experiences. And I still, to this day, have a stack of journals. Like, there's so many journals that I have, because just writing has just become a part of my daily practice, really.
Yeah, we're the opposite in our search, in our search and finding, because I grew up with parents who read all the time, always reading. My grandmother on my dad's side was always reading, but my grandfather on my mom's side was really into poetry and art and books, and my uncle as well, my mom's brother, big into classic literature and things. And so, like, I always read, always, like library days, like those things, like the best. Go find books, bring books home, read them. I always read. But my grandfather was just loved poetry, and he wrote poetry. And so he would read me his poetry. When I was in college, he would actually mail me poems and letters and things that were typed on his typewriter. And then when he passed, I got some of his first edition Keats and Shelley and Dante. And I mean, I've got them on my bookshelf, they're my treasures. So I always loved it. And I had this, for me, poets and the great writers and artists were like heroes, because I'd see them on my grandfather's wall or on his bookshelf. And he'd have the big Smithsonian books and the, you know, American History of Art books and all these huge coffee table books that I would just geek out on when I was a kid. And so I started writing, I don't know when, but I think when I went through all my journals last year when I was doing a whole body of work on poetry, paintings, I think the earliest one I found was 1986. Really bad poetry, right? Angry young boy poetry. It was bad. But I just kept going, and it's like every year there's more journals and more journals, and I had to have a couple buckets of poetry journals, like via the stacks. So I've always written, always. And I still do today. It's just, it's a part of my soul, so.
You just triggered a memory for me.
Yeah, love
So my parents may have not read a lot, but my sponsor grandmother was an English teacher, and she wrote poetry. I think I shared with you that year she passed away, and she had 2 poetry books, and her poems actually influenced one of my body of work. And then my aunt, my sponsor aunt, was a librarian. So there was influences of literature in my life, and I could say that, you know, I've just become such a voracious reader. It's just become a part of, you know, my art practice. As artists, we take influences not from other, you know, visual arts, but also poetry and music and all those things. Anything that can evoke those feelings and evoke that creative process is essential.
So you have sort of touched on a few authors, and you kind of broadly mentioned some categories of work, but can you tell us some of your favorite books, authors that have really made an influence on you, really impacted you, and what has that influence or impact been?
How far back are we going? Because we could be here all night.
Yeah.
Adulthood, okay. Well, I think you have a few of our books over here.
Yes.
I mean, I love this table. It's one thing when you talk about it, and then when you visually see it all together, it's just like, oh, it's you right there, doesn't it?
Yep.
You know, for me, it's like our connection to authors are sometimes whether they're evoking a feeling or whether their background makes it feel that you can relate to them. You know, like they're speaking to you, right? For me, Ocean Vuong, he's actually a Vietnamese American poet. He started off in poetry, and now he's written his first novel that's over here, On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, which is, it's such a beautifully gut-wrenching story, because he wrote it for his mom. She's Vietnamese and she was illiterate. And he wrote it knowing she would never read it. And this is before she passed away. And about his life dealing and coping with, you know, the traumas that he felt from her upbringing, and then him being, you know, gay, and his discovery of that and who he was. And there's nothing better than like to read suffering and pain, but in such a beautiful way that you don't feel it, like in that context. And poets do it the best. And so for him to be a poet first, and be in that vein, and then to write prose in a book was just like, it was beautiful. So I highly recommend that book. He's been really influential to me as a poet, but also an author in his life that he's led, as well as his most recent novel. And then his second one that just came out, Time is a Mother, is he wrote after his mother passed away, in that book of poetry. And I like that title too, Time is a Mother, like time heals, right? There's something about time that like of impermanence, you know, of how important it is and how we much need to value it, and also how in time, in reference of memory, how important that is as well. Other authors, I like the classics too. Like Henry Miller is, to me, like, I hate to say this, but I like them better than Hemingway. Because I feel like Henry Miller, very different, right? But of the same era, but like there's something like very descriptive and poetic more. And there's like, even though they were both rough in their writing a little bit in regards to being a man's perspective, but their voraciousness of life and how Henry Miller took it in, how descriptive he was, really always spoke to me. Every year, at the end of every year, I always read The Alchemist. Pablo Coelho, did I pronounce that right? It's such, if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It's a really easy read, but it talks about this journey, this man's journey of his personal legend. And every single time I read it, at the end of a year, I always finish it by January 1st. That's the goal. I start after Christmas and I end it by January 1st, and it's a really easy read. But there's something about it, every single time I read it, no matter where I'm at in my life, I take something different from it. It feels different. And it's just, it's a really great way to end a year in reflection, and then look forward in the year as to what you see for yourself ahead. So I highly recommend that one.
So the worst question anybody can ask an avid reader, right? It's like, what are your 5 favorite books? What are your best books? Right? You're like, what era? Male or female? What culture? Right? Fiction, nonfiction? Like, where are we going here?
It's like,
So
what's your favorite movie?
Yeah, so it's like, you know, even when Kimberly sent the email with Jane of, hey, give us some books. I'm like, I gotta narrow this down. Like, it's so difficult, and so I did my best. But I mean, I can't even tell you what, you know, there's authors, right? We were talking about My Name is Asher Lev and The Gift of Asher Lev today. Like, to me, a writer has never known my soul as deep as Haydn Potok. Like, there's no way. The only person close is Madeline L'Engle. That, like, I feel like are soulmates, right, with me. And that's a book I read every year, is Walking on Water by Madeline L'Engle. I read it every year. And I also read the Wrinkle in Time trilogy usually every year as well. But because she taught me how to be a mystic. Like, she taught me as an artist how to be a mystic. But then one of my best friends, because his wife told him, you and Ty should read the Book of Hours by Rilke. My good friend Jeremy, his wife Sarah's good friends with Kimberly and Blake, said, you guys should read this book together. And we did, and I just got lost. I was like, somebody that understands darkness the way I do, and we were talking about this earlier today, not like darkness in the world, but sad things gravitate. They build my creativity. Sad things, sad songs, sad movies, like hard stories, like for some reason they drive my creativity. And Rilke speaks of the beauty of the darkness in that book in such a way that even in the emptiness and in the nothing, there's just absolute beauty in the heaviness and in these things. And that book just like took me on a Rilke just spiral. Somebody that we lost too young as a writer, but then some of my favorite artists in history were so inspired by Rilke. Cy Twombly, most of his work is based on Rilke poems and Rilke books and works and things. And his affinity for artists, his love of Cezanne and his love of other artists is what started to really draw me in. Oh, this is a brother. This is an old German brother from years ago. He's my peer. I need to read everything he's written. So that's usually how I operate. Like, there's a lot that I've read and a lot I haven't read, but I'm always grabbing something new to read it. And I hope we all operate that way, because we need it. Like, gosh, there's so much to learn from everybody, every culture, every walk of life that is written down for centuries that, let's gather it all and then let's just read it all and buy it all here at Fabled.
Yeah.
It's a little plug.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So we have about 5 to 7 books that each of them have said, this title is really meaningful to me. And so they're on sale. And so again, if something that they've said sort of sparked your curiosity, come look at the table, buy some books, we love it. Would y'all mind reading a poem or two from an author, the poet that you love? To share with us and maybe provide a little context to why this or what it means to you.
So there's no bigger inspiration in poetry and writing, film, all of it, than the biggest, most profound experience in life is love, right? Of course. And so the two poets that I chose speak about love in a way that I think, from their perspective, Pablo Neruda, he's an activist, he's a political activist, before he became a poet, and he understood the idea of interlining poetry and art with activism and how you can change the world with your words, right? And there's some power in that. And Rumi is the other poet that I chose, who speaks of the divine in a place of love, in a connection of the human experience that's very tangible. And so there's that spiritual element of love too that I appreciate. So I chose those two poets. So I'm going to read Pablo's, and many of you, if you know him, probably know this is one of his most well-known ones, is 100 Love Sonnets. You know that one? I don't love you as if you were a rose of salt, topaz, or arrow of carnations that propagate fire. I love you as one loves certain obscure things, secretly, between the shadow and the soul. I love you as the plant that doesn't bloom but carries the light of those flowers hidden within them itself. And thanks to your love, the tight aroma that arose from the earth lives dimly in my body. I love you without knowing how, or when, or from where. I love you directly without problems or pride. I love you like this because I don't know any other way to love, except in this form in which I am not, nor are you, so close that your hand upon my chest is mine, so close that your eyes close with my dreams. Yeah, I mean, that's something that I think, poetry does, is like that feeling of that longing and love and the grief that comes with it too, because we all know that at some point there's going to be grief there, right? And so there's something very, to love is to feel alive. And I think that's what's so beautiful about poetry. And the one I selected about Rumi is about the opposite of that, is what that looks like in the place of suffering. So, does anyone know Rumi? Yeah, he's great. It's been translated so many different times and in different ways, but I particularly love this one, Unseen Poems. I cure my pain with suffering. I cure my pain with suffering and make my work easier with patience. I pull the last foot of my soul out of the mud and bequeath my heart and soul to lovers. I am a moth burned in the candle of eternity, serving the royal candle of the king. I invite love into my burned heart, having but one heart to sacrifice for love. If the lower self is like a cat that meows, I know how to lure that cat into a sack. Whoever is sadly shaking his head, I pull into the circle and make him whirl. Since sadness comes from not having love, I make his soul fall in love with love itself. What is love? Absolute thirst. I try to speak about the fountain of life. Since I cannot find the words, I remain silent. Whatever I cannot put into words, I do.
All right. I'm going to share from my Mary Oliver. She's mine. I'm just joking, but I do feel like she's mine. And I'm going to share a short poem from Rilke as well. So, and both of these poems are actually, I have 2 paintings based on each of these poems in the show. So your homework is to go find them. Now you have to go. Okay, this poem is called Leaves and Blossoms Along the Way by Mary Oliver. If you're John Muir, you want trees to live among. And if you're Emily, a garden will do. Try to find the right place for yourself. If you can't find it, at least dream of it. When one is alone and lonely, the body gladly lingers in the wind or the rain, or splashes into the cold river, or pushes through the ice-crushed snow, anything that touches. God or the gods are invisible, quite understandable, but holiness is visible entirely. Some words will never leave God's mouth, no matter how hard you listen. In all the works of Beethoven, you will not find a single lie. All important ideas must include the trees, the mountains, and the rivers. To understand many things, you must reach out of your own condition. For how many years did I wander slowly through the forest? What wonder and glory I would have missed had I ever been in a hurry. Beauty can both shout and whisper, and still it explains nothing. The point is, you're you, and that's for keeps. I had a painting I did a few years ago that was based on a daydream, and it's called Today Mary Oliver and I Chatted Under a Tree, and then she got up and sprinted to the river and won. This was from a daydream I had. So this poem is by Rilke, and it's called The Dark Hours of My Being, and it's from the Book of Hours. I love the dark hours of my being. My mind deepens into them. There I can find, as in old letters, the days of my life already lived, and held like a legend, and understood. Then the knowing comes, and I can open to another life that's wide and timeless. So I'm sometimes like a tree, rustling over a gravesite, and making real the dream of the one its living roots embrace, a dream once lost among sorrows and songs.
Are we feeling things right now? Oh my goodness, it just cuts right to where the good stuff is. Yeah, thank you for sharing those. Can we talk about your own poetry?
Of course.
These two are poets. And your poetry is so inextricably interwoven many times with your paintings. So can you kind of give us just some insights into the relationship between your paintings and your poetry, and your poetry and your paintings, and how they live and exist and speak to each other?
It's how we process our wherever we're at, really, right? When we're writing or we're in the studio. And so this recent body of work was for me really a big time of grief for me, I'll be honest. And so it was processing a lot of grief and loss, and I wrote a lot during that time as well. It also has some works in it that show where I've been and who I was before. So for me, being able to see that progression was really important in my emotional journey and spiritual journey. So the poetry, that I've selected for tonight are, a point of reference in time of where I came from and where I've been and what it looks like moving forward.
How many writers do we have in the room? Any writers? How many people just write poetry? Don't consider yourself like, I'm not a writer, but I write poetry or journal, right? So how are cultures remembered? Culture is remembered by the contemporaries, those who are living now, the artists, the writers, the poets, the journal keepers, the architects, right? That's how history and cultures are remembered. So the importance, even if you're like, oh, I'm never gonna be a published author or a published writer, the importance of you continuing to write is important because it will at least be passed down through your family, through your grandkids, your great-grandkids. I mean, I've got stuff of my grandfather's, I've got poems, I've got letters from my grandfather, I have things, right? It's passed down to me, and it tells me of a time that once existed that I'm not a part of. And so for me, as an artist and as a writer and a poet, like, I'm a timekeeper. Whether I end up in the biggest museums in the world or whatever, I don't care. I'm a timekeeper of now. I observe what's around me, I write about it, I paint about it, and I try to put it out into the world so that an audience can see it. Maybe see some things they didn't recognize. Or maybe they can see some things that they forgot and they needed to remember, right? And so as creators, as artists or writers, we're timekeepers, right? It's our job, it's our role to be telling what's happening now for those to not forget that come along later. And I think that's the beauty of writing and creating, is being able to do those things and tell those stories and keep track of those time and those memories. So I weave mine into almost all my work. And for the last year and a half, I've only been painting from my poetry. So all the work I have done, they're basically lines from poems, periods of time in my life that I've written about that have meant things to me that I've created on canvas. And there may be some little lines from Rilke and Mary Oliver and other poets that I love, but the majority of it's from my own work.
Would you like to go ahead and share?
In some of my journals, I hope my children are fine.
Yeah. Lots of love.
Some of the poetry and some of the things we write is for ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's not necessarily always for everyone. All right, so I'm going to start off. I'm going to do 3.
Okay.
Points of past, point in place of processing, and point of future. Let me take a breath. This one's called Point East. Bodies of rusted metal, old sweat, spilled blood, leaving remnants of past skeletons floating in the unforgiving sea. Many have crossed its path with no end in sight. Sweet breath of hunger mixed with bitter tears of desperation. Cries and prayers for a better life, a better place not to die. Blackened fingers intertwined with cold barbed wires bound together by fear and old lies left behind. A war in my mind remains as real as the truth of the insane. Salted and pickled hearts laying in empty shells hardened by Zeus's hand. Darkness lies in the light, piercing my eyes with pain from the many who have traveled the same. Metallic taste upon my lips as my teeth pierce my dry, unspoken words. Stretches of endless sea, a horizon of red and unknown expectations. Dreaming of islands of ice running in between my naked bosom, warm streams heading south, welcoming him in, blinded by courageous flight or threats from the weak. Point the boat east. East is far away from what used to be me, far away from rivers of rice, mountains of sand, and calloused old hands. Peace and purple butterflies, white clouds of prosperity, promised to all those who wish to be free. Point the boat east, take it home for me. Shaky. This is called the silence after. The day began with vibrant colors showering upon our faces, waking us up and placing our souls within a dream, walking amongst a cloud of whispers and glances as we locked ourselves in embrace, our bodies tired and yearning to feel the comfort of our skin. We found ourselves in bed once more, allowing the ripples of sand to wash away our sores. Surrendering to the voices within, we no longer fought our carnal urges, bringing in the twilight into our view, our faces blurred from one into two. Fingers intertwined like vines around a tree, no longer knowing which one needed the other to feel free. We fell in and out of sleep, blurring the lines between heaven and earth, vibrating energies like a tethered cord pulling us into the warmth. Light became dark, and the reluctance we moved amongst statues, sculptures, and scriptures of forgotten cultures, until hunger set in for nourishment of another kind. We gorged ourselves with gifts from the gods, and rolled our plump cheeks from side to side, priming our senses for further delights. We crawled on our knees to fill ourselves up again for the night. Drifting again into sleep, consciously aware of the beauty of all that was seen, as simple as the bloom of a singular rose, the wilted petals must fall upon the gold wooden floor, permeating our senses like an intruder at the door. our eyes opened as they have done a million times before, but the silence was so loud, it shook my soul to the core. What will become of this beautiful day? When will I feel the same again? Will it ever be enough so I can stop holding my breath, waiting for the silence to become permanent, revealing the deepest pains that were left behind from many, many moons ago, but still present as if the marks were just made a minute or so. It was within that silence. The cries of a little girl began to be seen. Her fears were unearthed and held within my light. Knowing the unwavering love felt on that day would live on in verse, forever marked as the day that broke a long and undeserving curse. So I thank you for that dream of a day, and I look forward to many more comforting silences after, reminding us to live in the present, walking hand in hand into our greatest vision, knowing our love is all that matters. Stitches. Tearing slowly at my stitches, frayed and singed, ambers flickering off, silk sheets covered in forgotten ashes. Warm rivers of spit fill up my parched mouth, an alien tongue is welcomed home. Continuing to pull me at the seams, careful not to put weight on the shards of glass hiding underneath. Deep wounds covered up in self-inflicted patches of salt, washed away with gentle streams of warmth and calm. Leaving behind an innocence long forgotten, falling onto gray clouds filled with technicolor dreams, flesh melting into flesh, cuts healing upon cuts, pulling in deeper until one becomes one. Knowing this pain won't be for long. Knowing this tenderness is all or none. Knowing new stitches are to come.
Thanks. So we were laughing about this earlier because neither of us have read since college, basically, right? And so we're talking, 99?
No, I read
2000?
2005.
2005,
I
okay.
wrote it Maya because we had a spoken word
Yep.
open mic night.
Yeah. So I used to read every weekend in college, right? That's what you did in art school. If you weren't painting, you were reading poetry somewhere. So it's been a while for both of us. And even though we share our souls on the wall, it's way different hanging your soul on a wall than reading your soul out loud. So thanks for doing it.
Bearing our souls.
Yeah. Thanks for doing it, because it's not easy. So I've got 3 poems as well, and they're kind of spread out through time, these. So let's see, I've got a 95, I think I've got a 2000, and then like a 2018 poem, so they're kind of across. And it's always funny reading your earlier work, because you're like, whether you're painting or writing, you're just like, good Lord, really? That's what was in me then? Anyways, okay. And these are all paintings in the show as well. These are poems from the paintings. So, nervously, I confiscate beats in this propaganda mind that rests on a twisting pole, swiveled atop burdened shoulders, weight, fracture, melody, drum, kick, flow. Movements ease past break points and stare past misty eyes and malnutrition passions. Mouth off to air if you think it helps. Conceited, you look like everyone else to me. Judgmental jewels around your wrist neck that hold your small head in minimal thought patterns. Daylight and missteps draw upon cracks in the sidewalk. How's her back doing these days anyway? Resting cases and juried sheets that the cold holds dear as the body shivers from entering. This sums it all up. 5+ worry and 18 times all right doesn't get us numerically closer in any respect. Lead me on towards winter's chill in the moon's soft mist, because clinging to dusty walls only begs of handshakes that fall flat and stiff. For I am the one sitting and writing in the early AM, borrowing time from the early arrival of the sun, the light, fingers weary yet thoughts vomiting in type. Iridescent bulbs flicker and annoy, but I am just one in the singular boy. That was from college. So that one was probably like 96. Feels like it. All right. Decent reads dry as I read none. Too far, distance creaks along the walls of fame. A little tired from too much NyQuil and the pianos drown the touch. Eyes sag, colors fade, and I mix them into perfectionate mess. I smear self into shape, cutting out dust-shapen thought. The blinking with the eyes taking a beating. Lights, camera smile, corner dimple. Mistakes behind that face, those hands, and swallowing hard. All in time, all is due, all is grace. This one is for, if you've been to the show, there's a really large installation piece that I did. A big sculpture I've done today, and this is from that piece. Naked universe. I ride helpless and hopeless on its whims and gestures, you know the kind. Half-caught TV flickers in a dark, haunting way. Fashionable and retro enough in its 16-millimeter blink. I sway through electricity and cold watercolor wash as rivers of monument build sand and aspirations. This is the way out. This is the way out, she says. Take the beachside road, your only way out of nothing.
Wow. Thank you, R&B, for sharing those with us. This feels like, again, a moment that I wouldn't want to have missed, and I hope you feel the same. I mean, thank you. That was incredible. I'm curious, this isn't on the outline, but what does it feel like to have done that?
You know, it's whenever I feel a sense of fear of anything, I go towards it. So, I mean, I was literally on the phone with a friend, and I was on with Ty on the way up here and talking to him at dinner. Like, I'm nervous. Like, you know, it's something like you were saying about painting. It's like, you know, you're not seeing us in the studio necessarily when we're doing it. It's not like someone's watching us in our process, right? You get to see the after effects and the final product, and we get to just stand back and watch how people interact with it. There's something very raw about reading your own words that come from a very personal space, a very, you know, vulnerable and intimate place that is in the moment being received. And so that's a different dynamic in sharing a creation. And I have to say, I'm glad I did it. Man, I might have to go do some spoken word soon.
Yeah.
It's like, it's coming back. But yes, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it so much.
I love stuff like this.
Yeah.
I mean, you know me. But I mean, I get more nervous and scared about you going, oh, let me read about Ty here for a second. Like that's when I'm like, no, don't talk about me. No. But honestly, like this is incredible, not just because we get to share about ourselves, but a little story for everybody. I don't remember how many years ago it was, Kim, when we were standing on the beach in Galveston and talking about the dream you have.
I'd like to say that at least 12
Maybe
ish.
12-ish, 14 years ago.
Could be 14.
We're on the beach in Galveston, and we're just kind of talking about life and dreams, and she's sharing about her dream to have a bookshop someday, you know. And so to be able to be sitting here, right, and like sharing our souls and our hearts and things, and like we're talking about our dreams and what we're doing, and I'm sitting in a dream, right, being able to do that is like really special. So it's definitely mystical. The mystic in me, it's like beautiful, it's purposeful. And so to be able to just sit in here and walk around and bring people into that as well, and then share the story with them and things, to me is just like an incredible circle of how beautiful this life is and can be. So, yeah.
Incredible.
I do feel like I'm in a dream because I never 10 years ago before I started doing art would I have ever imagined my life like this. And to be in this bookstore and be able to share my words as well as my art, knowing it's just down the street, it's just like, I feel like the reason why I'm feeling this way is because, man, it's, gosh, whatever it is that you want to do, say yes to it. Whatever feeds your soul, take it in, do it. Because when you do that, you answer to God or the universe or the energies that are calling to you. It's amazing how the universe opens up to you. And I never imagined my life this way, that I get to share this work and be able to connect with people this way, and then also have my children see this side of me. So thank you so much.
you, V. Oh my gosh, thank you, V. Okay, so we're gonna wind down and save some time. Save some time for audience questions. We want to hear from y'all and what you're curious about. So just kind of last thing here, what's on the horizon for y'all? Your show is here in Waco for another 5+ weeks. What sort of artistically, intellectually, humanly, what's on your mind? What are you excited or curious about? What's on the horizon?
Well, I just came back from Colorado for vacation because after the show I really needed the rest. But as soon as I came back, went right back into the studio. I have a show in August, a 2-person show as well at a Costa Gallery, August 18th. So it's right back into work and a new body of work as well. That's really going to push me even further. I take every show as an opportunity to push myself. And so I have that. I'm also, as Ty said, I've been starting doing a lot of public speaking around my journey and sharing and hoping to inspire other people to answer to creative voice as well as understanding the importance of emotional mental health. And so I've been starting that journey as well, and I'm super excited to potentially come back to Baylor and speak in that aspect. And so I feel like kind of like the world's my oyster at this point, like in the sense of like not knowing what's ahead is actually really exciting, but knowing that I'm getting to feed my passions as well as inspire and help others to answer theirs. I think that's what keeps me going. So that's what I'm excited about.
Yeah, I'm in the midst of my, it's 49 artist mentorship program now, because I've got 5 new ones that I'm in the middle with mentoring from around the US, well, around the globe. So I'm in the middle of that right now. I have a residency in Newfoundland, Canada next year in April, which I'm really excited about. That will be a group residency with 6 artists that I've mentored from around the world. We'll be doing the residency together on the cliffs of Newfoundland on the furthest most point of North America, which will be really exciting, where all the icebergs pass by. So it's gonna be really fun. And those artists are 6 artists from 6 different countries. So it'll be 7 of us there for a month. And then I'm still pitching my first novel to literary agents, because you just get a lot of no's. Naomi and I were talking about earlier. I mean, it's the life, right? Of art and literature, creative things, you get a lot of no's. And as Sylvia Plath said, my rejection slips prove that I'm trying, right? And if you're not trying, you're not getting a no.
Yeah.
So still pitching that. And I don't know what else is on the horizon for this year. A few trips maybe. A lot of trips to Houston to go to MFAH. But yeah, that's what's going on right now.
Okay. Does anybody have a question for Ty and V? What do we want to know from them? What are we curious
If you don't
about?
ask, I'm gonna pick people to ask.
Yeah.
We love questions, so ask.
Yes.
So I've seen your exhibit, Big Ben, and walking through it, there was this really cool like dichotomy between you were talking about how you name your pieces, and it almost feels like you can see each one happening like to different people, like as you're reading the title, looking at the piece, and you talk about this great friendship that you have, and it all like hearing it now, it becomes this big like movement. Do you think that you would have been able to achieve that this like melding effect that you have, like intertwining your respective pieces, if you didn't have like the relationship that you have with everybody else?
So I've been in a lot of group shows where you don't know the other artist, and really the reason why those shows may work is because the curator knows the individual artist's work and knows how they'll speak to each other and picks which one. And so you relinquish control in that situation, but you trust in the curator to know all the artists' work enough that they speak. And a lot of times they speak really well together, and sometimes they don't. And that's just dependent upon how well that curator knows your work and in each artist. In this situation, Jane gave us a lot of trust, really, because she trusted in our friendship. I don't think so. I don't think it would have worked if we hadn't known each other so well and trusted each other so much, and understood each other the way we did. And I hope that everyone feels that when they see it, so thank you. I appreciate that so much.
No, I agree, 100%. It would not have been that way. Nope, not a chance.
Yes.
I have so many questions. Do you need a reader for your novel? I'll read it anytime. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, I will. But I'd love to know about how many books you read a year.
Oh gosh.
Just curious. And then also, like, your favorite, most inspiring literary or artistic friendship that feels really inspiring or nostalgic for you, for y'all.
That's a big question.
That was like
Yes.
a 3-part deep one.
I'm sorry.
I read a
No,
lot.
no.
Sorry.
I'm gonna start at the end and work my way back. So Gertrude Stein and Picasso. Most people won't know this because Picasso was kind of a jerk, right, in life. And a jerk male, right? Womanizer, a lot of problems. Well, most people don't know his best, most trusted friend was a lesbian woman in Paris who's an American expat in
Yeah.
Paris, right? That at the time got no respect from people at all, other than her little community of artists and writers. I mean, there wouldn't be Hemingway without Gertrude Stein, right? Their relationship, I have a book, it's about this thick, and it's correspondence of Picasso and Gertrude Stein, their relationship. And I'm like, Picasso might not have been Picasso as we know him without Gertrude Stein. It's a pretty impressive relationship, to say the least. To books, I can't even tell you, it's up and down. I'm probably reading 20 right now, maybe 15. I mean, Mandy knows there's stacks of books all over our house. And I'm not a start and finish. I'm reading 20 books at a time, and I'm going back and forth, and then one bores me, and I jump to this one, go to this one. Right now, I'm really enthralled with Faith, Hope, and Carnage by Nick Cave, the Australian musician and writer. And it's really, and the whole book's an interview, and it's heart-wrenchingly beautiful and spiritually just meaty. But those books are usually the ones that I gravitate to. But then I bounce from nonfiction for a while, but then I've got to retreat, and then I go into some fiction. So I'm reading the Starship Troopers, the original science fiction book from the 50s, which most people don't know. That's from the 50s. That wasn't a modern book. But I'll jump all over the place. And then if a friend says, you should read this, and it's in my cart, or I come here and get it. It's not in my cart somewhere. It's a lot. And I read for work, right, for mentoring artists. I can't tell you how many art history books I read regularly and books on art, so I can continue to build my wisdom up to teach other artists as well.
I'm the same as you. Maybe not 15, 20, but like, I literally usually have 5 books that I'm rotating through. I usually have a biography, a nonfiction, which is usually spiritual based, or a growth mindset, place of learning, a fiction, and then an art book, and then like a poetry book. So I'm usually going back and forth between 5 books or so as well. It's important for creatives to take the time to be quiet with ourselves, and I think reading forces us to do that. It inspires and continues the knowledge and the growth mindset that we need. In regards to partnerships and friendships, mine are probably a lot more strained than yours, that one. I mean, it's a great one, but like, I don't know it historically as much as you do. I mean, I think of like, when I think about couples, I think of like Lee Krasner and Poetic and Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo. Like, I don't know, they're tumultuous relationships for some reason, or I find ultimately very interesting to have 2 creatives together and what that dynamic would look like. Makes me wonder. I always dream of this idea of being with a creative, and I'm like, I don't know, like what that would look like. But yeah, I mean, I love reading about their life and their influences of each other and stuff.
Another question. Anybody else?
Kimberly had more.
Yeah, if you don't have any, Kimberly, keep asking. Yeah.
Yes, Emma.
I guess this mostly for you. As an artist and a physician, it seems
a great question. Everyone always asks me that. How do you do all those things? I didn't feel fully formed until I got back to my art. That's the honest truth. I was an artist when I was young. That's who I was. And then I found myself in medicine in a place of service as well as a responsibility, being, you know, a child of immigrants and taking every chance of opportunity possible. But I didn't feel whole until I came back into my art, and they influence each other, and they balance each other. You know, being a physician, it's very easy to get burned out, especially during COVID. It was work, and art was what kept me alive and gives me that balance so that I can be present in my job, and then doing the medicine allows me to feel like I can then go internal and then be in that place of art as well. So they are absolutely interchangeably communicating with each other in my place of existence. I couldn't be whole if I didn't do both. Both are also in acts of service, just in different ways. You know, to me, it's just thinking of healing in different ways. So how I balance it out, I'm lucky that I'm a hospice and I work in a hospital and it's shift work. That's the only way I can be able to have studio time. But what I realize is that people are like, how are you able to do all the things? I'm like, the problem is everyone thinks that you have to multitask. And studies have shown that that's inefficient. You can't do anything effectively when you're multitasking. Being present in whatever you're doing in the moment and doing it efficiently allows you to give you actually more time and more abundance of time. We always think about time in this place of scarcity as opposed to abundance. And when you're in the present moment, it feels sometimes when you're into something that time stands still, right? You're so hyper-focused on it and you're so much more efficient and more successful at it. So when I'm at work, I'm being present with my patients and I'm giving them my time. When I'm at home with my children, I'm giving them my time. When I'm home in the studio, I'm dedicating myself to that time. And because of that, I'm able to feel fulfilled in all those things without it feeling overwhelming of all the things that I want to do, because they all serve the same purpose.
So V is like the best artist friend to have because of my mentorship program. She's the example that I use when I say, don't tell me you don't have time. Because all artists work. So all artists work. The percentage of artists who just make a living selling art and who make a lot of money, I mean, you can't even find it on the decimal chart, right? You can name them on 2 hands, right? Outside of that, even the biggest artists in the world, like Marilyn Minter, who's one of the biggest female artists in the world, she teaches at NYU in the grad program, right? So it's like, every artist works. So I always get young artists that say, well, I just don't have time to really experiment and really go for it because of my job. And then I'm like, you're 26 years old, you're single, you live at home, you have plenty of time to experiment and grow in your work. You have lots of time. Let me tell you why. Because my friend V,
Yeah. Okay, well, we're gonna wrap up our formal Q&A. And again, thank you, Ty and V. Can we just give them another round of applause? What a life-giving night. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing so much with us. We feel so honored and we hold that very sacred. So thank you. Like we said, some of their most favorite books are behind us on this table for sale. Pick some up. You may have a little bit of time to grab another glass of wine, perhaps mingle, come up and talk to Ty and V, ask them more questions, take a picture with them. Thank y'all so much for being here. These times are magical, yes, because of Ty and V, but also because of people like you who are here. So
yeah, thanks
thank
for
you
coming.
so much. Thank you, Fabled.
Yes.
Yes.